Hi everyone, Gent here. So in today's video I'm going to be talking about what an isolation is, and not the quarantine kind. Make sure you stick around to the end of the video because I'll also be talking about the martial applications of these movements. Okay, so let's get into it. So I'll be explaining how an isolation works with a staff, club and also a sword. But to begin with, I'm going to explain the principles with this ball and chain. Now, I don't recommend you do this if you haven't experienced this type of thing before, as it's quite heavy. So I suggest using something like a tennis ball and a sock if you want to try this movement out. So if I start off this movement by rotating around my wrist, you can see here this is the pivot point. As the ball goes round, it's just all rotating around this one point. However, if I start to move my hand out, you can see the rotation point has now changed and it's actually in the middle of the chain. And that's because I'm pulling at an opposite force as the ball is dropping round. So as the ball travels round, I'm giving it that little bit of a pull, and obviously this needs to change depending on where the ball is. Obviously at the top it becomes lighter, and then as it drops down, gravity starts to pull it down further, and then I've got to give it that pull in that counter direction. So then you start to get a movement where you're following the ball round. We can actually then manipulate it much easier as we've got more control over the object. So as it's spinning round, as I can feel the weight, so I'm pulling in the equal amount in the opposite direction, I can then start to switch it, so I start to change the direction in whichever way I want. And that's because I've got that control where I'm just following the motion wherever the ball goes. I can then go off on a tangent, so if you think of the circle is like this, I can then shoot off at whichever tangent I want. So the most obvious use of this movement is if you applied it to something like a rope dart or meteor, where when it's spinning round, you're letting the movement fire off into whichever direction you want. Now obviously this is just on a short chain, but the same would apply if it was on a longer chain, you're using those same principles. But how does it also apply to the staff and sword? So if we take the staff, one way to look at it is to isolate around a certain point, for example where my elbow is, and rotate around that one point, and then you get some effect that looks like this. Now that is the same movement if we did it with the club. I can isolate around my elbow and get that same effect with the club, same as with the staff. So if I, for example, take a figure 8 motion, rather than rotating around my wrist like I did with the ball and chain, I could pick another point and move around that one point, and it creates this effect with the staff. And essentially I'm following this side, a bit like I did with the ball and chain when I was doing the isolation, and it makes the staff feel really light when you're moving it round. Now if, for example, we're looking at it with the sword, and I take this motion where I'm bringing it around and get underneath the sword, bring it around, now I'm following behind it, it now could turn into a downward thrust, or I could take it round to the other side. It gives me that option. So essentially I'm creating a circle, and then at any point on that circle you can go off on a tangent and thrust. So some of you might already be doing an isolation without even realising it. If we take the 15th Suburi for example, this movement here is a thrust that's actually going off a tangent from a circle. When I was talking before about this movement here, see, as it's moving round, it's actually going off at a tangent. It's this circular motion here. So it's that same circular motion, but as it comes down, it's turning into a thrust. It's moving around that circle and then shooting off at a tangent. So once you start to understand the isolations, there's so many other things that you can explore, such as anti-spins. However, I'll cover that in another video. So I hope you found that interesting. If you did, leave your comments down below, and if you enjoyed the video, remember to like, share and subscribe, as this helps the channel grow. Anyway, until next time, take care, and I hope to see you soon.